welcome to The Way Back, a discussion of the film and television industry in the COVID-19 era. The series is presented by Green Slate and produced by the Catch a Break podcast. I'm Julie Harris Walker, the SVP of West Coast Operations at Green Slate and the host for the Catch a Break podcast. Today is the fourth in our series we're having about working in the age of COVID-19. And today we're talking about what kinds of productions might be dipping their toes in first. What genres might have an easier time? Can reality and indie films pivot more quickly and with smaller crews? And a big part of all of this is now that we know the protocols, how do you actually make them happen on the ground? I'd like to introduce our panel. Matt Miller is the owner of the critically acclaimed independent production studio Vanishing and is a Spirit Award nominated producer. His films are regular favorites at festivals like Sundance, South by Southwest, and Cannes. Frequent collaborators of writer-director Patrick Wang, Matt has produced all of his features, including A Bread Factory, Grief of Others, and In the Family. Other feature-producing credits include Beast Beast, Thunder Road, We the Coyotes, Too Late, American Folk, Amira and Sam, and The Dramatics. His series and short producing credits include Stargate Origins, Matt Pat's Game Lab, The Robbery, and Krista, among numerous others. Matt currently has several projects in post-production, including Jim Cummings' The Beta Test, Josh Rubin's Werewolves Within, Mari Walker's See You Then, baseball documentary It Ain't Over, and MGM Orion's The Werewolf. Dwight Smith is an award-winning television producer who currently serves as co-president of Mission Control Media. Mission Control has also been named repeatedly as one of the top unscripted production companies in the world by Real Screen magazine. Signature Mission Control projects include Face Off, as well as the hit NBC game show Hollywood Game Night featuring Jane Lynch. In addition to winning 2 Emmys and 4 WGA awards, Hollywood Game Night has also been commissioned in well over 20 international territories. Other Mission Control series include The Soup, Floored, First and Last, Planet of the Apes, Game Face, and Framework. Additional projects produced and or written by Dwight include Project Runway, Last Comic Standing, Weakest Link, General Hospital, Days of Our Lives, Hit Me Baby One More Time, Phenomenon, How to Be a Grown-Up, Celebrity Food Fight, Marcel's Quantum Kitchen, Hot Set, WCG, Ultimate Gamer, and Late Night Liars. Welcome, Dwight. Colleen Bell is the Executive Director of the California Film Commission. As Film Commissioner, she oversees governmental efforts to facilitate motion picture, television, commercial, and new media productions statewide. Prior to leading the CFC, she served as U.S. Ambassador to Hungary from 2014 to 2017. And for her work as U.S. Ambassador, she received the Order of Merit Middle Cross, which is the second highest state order of Hungary. Prior to her diplomatic service, Colleen was a producer at Bell Philip Television Productions, an award-winning production company responsible for some of the world's most watched TV programming. Devoted to public service, Colleen is a longtime philanthropist and advocate committed to tackling some of the most complex domestic and international policy challenges. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Dwjuan Fox has worked his way up from a production assistant to having over 35 feature credits as a film producer. His producer credits include the IFC 2019 theatrical release Radio Flash, 2018 theatrical release releases Danger One, High Voltage, and Armed, and 2017 Sundance Midnight Series premiere. Do you say XX or double X?
It's XX. Yeah.
2014 Midnight Series premiere of Virtually Heroes. Dwjuan also served as the officer corps as a tank commander and platoon leader in a forward-deployed U.S. Armored Battalion in the Republic of Korea. Dwjuan went on to obtain his master's degree in producing from AFI. He's the founder of Decipher Entertainment, a commercial feature and television production company, has taught the art of line producing and movie magic budgeting at UCLA Extension, and is a proud member of the PGA. Dwjuan has combined his film and military training by maneuvering crews and equipment by train, plane, and automobile in over 13 countries and 6 currencies throughout the world. Welcome, Dwjuan.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
So as we jump in, this is a panel and a podcast, so we will try to be as conversational as this format will allow and as the internet is stable. If you are on Zoom or on Facebook, we're going to be taking your questions also toward the end, so please type them into whichever platform you're on and our team will collect them and send them to me. So Colleen, I wanted to start with you. I think you were involved in setting the protocols with the governor for the state, and in broad strokes, what is the latest and where do we stand with everyone agreeing to what the protocols should be?
The protocols, guidelines, and best practices, there have been so many different entities who have been working to build products, such as the Task Force Safety Committee, which was unions and other various stakeholders who've come together and put together a very kind of detailed, granular product on guidance, safety protocols and procedures, etc. So in terms of the state, yes, I mean, early on, everybody was sending me what they had going. It was pretty extraordinary. You've got, small production facilities who were building out best practices and protocols, and then the larger studios, so many, all kind of sending them to me. And, I was, aggregating and putting everything together and communicating back and forth with Sacramento. At the end of the day, the guidance from the state was issued on June 12th, and that was from the county public health department, which allowed for production to reopen in the state of California. And the recommendation and the guidance was to defer to county public health orders. So now counties are putting together some baseline guidelines for their various different counties, and upon those there'll be more layers. So production companies, studios, et cetera, and it's also the guidance in the press release too was to refer to the agreements between labor and management. So that's sort of how the way it played out for the state. But I'm really pleased that we were able to issue the green light. When we were able to do that, it was important to get some of those more discrete backlot studio operations up and running, like construction, metalwork, training, etc., to prepare for this kind of new normal on set. So that's a good thing, and production is resuming. It's taking place. Some counties faster than others. There's still negotiations taking place between AMPTP and kind of working and management. So that's all kind of playing out, and just access to testing, training of COVID compliance officers. It's all happening right now. But there is some filming taking place, and it's smaller productions, generally speaking.
All right, so it is a lot of moving parts. Once we get that kind of framework in place, there's still a lot of let's figure out on the ground how to do it, which I think we're going to talk about a lot today. A couple last questions for you in this opening part. Is it true that all the counties in California are open now?
All the counties in California. Yeah, I believe so. It's all happening it's all happening real time. But yes, in LA County actually was because of our high concentration of production activity here in LA County. That was the big question, because as the state opens, how far behind would the county be? And the county really kind of mirrored the state's timeline on that, and was able to open up, shortly thereafter, within a few days.
Okay, so then I assume you're issuing permits, and what kind of demand are you seeing for permits now?
Yes, correct. We are issuing permit. Mostly the demand for permitting, and not even just from all of the state facilities and locations and properties, which is what we issue permits for, but also, Film LA, for instance, mostly for commercial shoots and still photography at this point, and then now some kind of smaller productions are requesting permits.
Okay, great.
It's slow but steady.
Now, Dwight, I know you shot during the shutdown. I'd love for you to tell us all about that, and how did it go?
Yes, we have. We've actually shot several different projects. They've all been done in a very sort of COVID mindful way. We have one show that we have continued. It's a daily show we're doing on Quibi, which we shoot every single day. It's a music sort of news interview show. It's shot at our host house. He shoots himself. He has a setup there. The footage is then taken to our editors who work at home, and all of our producers work from their homes on a Zoom call. So that is a daily production that has continued. And I'm really happy with the fact that we've been able to figure out a model there that we could continue in a safe way and also keep everybody employed, which I think is, during this time, really, really important to make sure that people can work if we can make it happen. One of the more high-profile projects we did during this time was we did what we called Hollywood Game Night Social Distancing Edition, which was a special on NBC. And we decided that it would be really an appropriate time to bring a little levity and some humor to people in times where people are maybe going a little stir crazy and a little nuts. And so for those of you who don't know Hollywood Game Night, it supposedly takes place in Jane Lynch's home. It's a game night and a game show. And there's 6 celebrities in every episode, and there's also 2 civilians. For our special, we got rid of the civilians. They played for charity. It was for Red Nose Day, which is an NBC affiliated, or NBC is involved in that as a charity. And we had 6 celebrities who were all in their homes playing. And so we had sent kits to all of their homes with 2 cameras, lights, monitors, a whole hookup. And we gave them the option to either have a tech person come to their home, set it up for them, or do it themselves. And we had 5 of the 6 were comfortable having a tech manager come into their home to do it. There was 1 celebrity who was not, and we had a tech person outside that person's sliding glass door screaming instructions to them as they were inside doing the whole hookup. But it kind of was you figure out as you go. So Jane Lynch, who hosts it, was an amazing trooper. She hosted it from her home. We had a whole setup in her house. And then once the show was shot, they were all there in their homes by themselves with no other people present. And it was surprising how well the electronics and all of it worked, because they have to have buzzers where they can buzz in and it can lock out the other people. They had to have monitors where they could see the game material. So it was actually a fairly complicated system. It seemed much simpler than it was, but it came out pretty well. We were pretty happy with the way it worked.
Now, did you also have kind of a home base of producers putting it all together? Camera A, camera B, were you doing all that?
There was, during the actual show?
Yeah.
There was. We had a setup on a stage. We were on a sound stage, and we had it was a small group of people, possibly 8 people on a sound stage, spread all very far apart. There was a COVID compliance officer there overseeing to make sure everything was being done safely, and it was sort of the nerve center where the cameras were all being monitored and everything was being done. We were communicating with the celebrities, briefing them on the games, and sort of coaching them through the entire thing. So it was a very minimal footprint compared to what we normally have when the show is shot.
So that's great news for content, but not so great news for, say, workforce. Because how many people do you normally employ in that kind of a show?
It's hard for me to know for sure. I would say on a tape day, there's maybe 60, 80 people on stage, something like that. Yeah, so it definitely is a much, much smaller footprint.
Yeah, but you still made it happen. It's incredible.
We did, yeah.
So Matt, I want to pivot to you. I know you do a bunch of different types of productions at Vanishing Angle. So what are you looking at as to what could we try to do first? What type?
Sure. I mean, we're in a unique, special space, I think more than most people, in the fact that we are as diverse as you said. We have large scale productions on the commercial side and even some of our features. We've worked with studios, but we also have been sort of committed to doing a lot of like very small independent features. I think of the 17 we've done, 13 of them are well under $1 million, and they're usually like a first time feature with a writer director. And it puts us in a position in one sense to be the crew most able to perform under the new circumstances, that like we understand how to work with a crew of 15 to 20 people and how to make that still look like a commercially viable product. So we're set up really well that way. On the flip side, I think it's going to be a bit of some time before those types of productions are able to come back, the more independently driven films. I think there's a couple factors to that. Mainly, most of those films, like you're just trying to do it for as inexpensively as you can, because they're usually passion projects, they're high risk. So you're trying to like just keep the cost as low as possible. And with all the new mandates from the unions, and I think for our level and the purposes of my conversation, the one we talk about most is SAG, because when you start to be, under $500,000 or under $250,000, you really start to look at the sort of SAG tiers as the markers for when you jump into a bigger budget. And so the first marker for that is the sort of 250K level of when you're making like an ultra low budget film. And what you're really trying to do is just squeeze a feature film with the least amount of compromise under that $250,000 number, Because if you jump over it, then the SAG rates increase, then your budget increases, and then you start to hit where you need to really be considering being an IATSE crew, which that can have a jump increase, and then you need to really consider having a Teamster crew. So there's all these thresholds you're trying to stay under. And for us, when you're trying to stay under that 250K number, if you're having to add in personnel for, COVID testing, if you're having to add in personnel for watching over the set to make sure people are maintaining social distancing, if you're having to do tests twice a week, I mean, even the simple math of like, the tests are ranging between $150, $200. So if you have a $150 test for 20 crew members, you're already looking at $3K. That's almost the cost of a crew member for the run of that show. Like a lot of our crew members on these 250K films are working for around $200 a day for a 20-day shoot. Like that's, $5,000. So like you're already looking at the rate of a crew member just for the testing. So you essentially have to start making that compromise of either bringing the budget up that you're going to increase that threshold, jump to the next tier, start having your budget higher, starting to have to look at being an IATSE crew, all of that stuff, or you're striking a crew member from your set completely. And when you're already working with a crew of 15, maybe 20 people, you can't lose any more people. So I think that's going to be the real tricky part, is that type of content. But I think where we're going to succeed is taking the principles of those types of films and applying them to commercially driven content. So brands that need content to go out into the marketplace, being able to say like, listen, that commercial that, you have the budget for, to be able to do the things that are necessary for the unions and the protocols, we can do that, but on a smaller scale, but still deliver something that looks like it was done by a 50-person crew.
Yeah. So the smaller the budget, the bigger the percentage of the COVID hit.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's going to be, it's tough. It feels, right now, it feels very problematic to try to do one of those productions. I think that what people are exploring, which we haven't yet, is that idea of like taking an entire crew, all quarantined in a single house together, write a script that has 2 characters that are, and everybody lives together for a 4-week period. And I think that there's going to be some really fun, creative stuff that comes out of that. And, I think 10 years ago when we founded the company, we probably would have been one of those groups. But I think now just the type of content we're looking at and the scale in which we're looking to do it, I think that that's just a difficult proposition for us.
Yeah, I think it's hard for, people with families, people managing a bunch of productions. There's a whole lot of factors that go into that. Dwjuan, I want to move to you. I know you're looking a lot into the nuts and bolts of how do you source this stuff, tests and COVID compliance officers and all the things you're going to need around it. What are you saying? What are you coming up with?
Oh, yeah, first I want to say, Colleen, thank you for everything that you've done to get us all back out into the field. That's thank you for that. And then
thanks, Dwight.
And then I want to kind of jump off of something that Matt also said, which was, I think that what's happening is completely flattening the playing field. It's bringing the higher tiered movies are going to have to like start to come down and think more like us indies. And then unfortunately, I think that our lower priced films, things in the SAG ultra low and things like that, are going to have to really think about coming up, because I don't know if I see a way where when you are talking about 20 to 15 crew members that you can cut unless you compromise on your story. So, so that's one of the things that I want to comment on that part. And then, so it's bringing us all closer together. Yes, it is adding, and as a line producer, that's the bottom line starts to get there, and you're talking about minimum 3 tests a week for your cast, for your zone A people, and then just what equipment are you going to use? What type of so if you're shooting on a stage, I think that's a lot easier. Let's say you're in a practical location in a house. How are you going to establish your zone A? Are you going to put zone B outside the house now, where in the indie world, the hypothetical zone A and zone B were all mixed together, because that's all you had the ability to do. So now are you going to have to like encase the house and, or zone B tents around the house, and then you create tents and plastic, and now you need cooling systems for Los Angeles, and so it does really change your budget crew-wise. Outside of, also, one thing, we've talked about the COVID compliance officer, the COVID monitor, and the COVID manager, which are 3, depending on the size of your crew. You could have up to 3 minimum personnel there. But now there's also, you're going to need extra security to maintain so your monitor is just not there to tell people you can't come in to this spot, because the question is, how many entrances to zone A do you have? So you may actually have to hire more security personnel to protect your zones, which then, most indies have 1 security person or 2, depending on how many, if they have a parking lot or something, or a base camp. So yeah, it starts to increase the budget no matter what. It's
one thing to see it on paper and think, oh yeah, all of that makes sense. That's all doable. But when you start to look at the actual every single part, which leads to all the other things that aren't necessarily on the white paper, gosh, a lot of moving parts. Matt, are you still thinking about traveling to kind of go to less hot zones to be able to shoot?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we're thinking about. We've done a lot of productions on the road in general. I mean, outside of COVID, like, we just like that atmosphere of everybody staying at like a collective Airbnb together and cooking dinner together and making a movie together. Like, there's a sort of like summer camp feel to it that infuses the creative with a different energy. But it does feel like there's an inherent risk. I think somebody mentioned it earlier, of like people having families to go home to, that if you can relocate everybody anyway and just have like one hotel that, like, hopefully you can take over the majority of the hotel, or if you have several Airbnbs that the crew can quarantine to get, like, a departmental Airbnb or something. It even if those locations are available within Los Angeles County, it starts to mitigate the risk to not have, sort of people exiting, even the pods you talk about on set. Like, every single person has their own pod that they go back to, and the factors just increase as, someone goes home to their family. And if they have, 2 or 3 family members, that increases the risk higher and higher. And I think the challenging thing about it all is really just the science behind it, of you can test people every 2 days, and you can check temperatures, and you can remove a crew member if they come up positive. But I think there's still a lot to learn about the disease. And like, I'm by no means a medical expert, but like, when I hear things about how, if you think you've been exposed, you really need to wait 7 days to get tested, because it's not sure if you have enough of it in your system for it even to show up on a test, but you definitely have enough to be contagious, and things like that, that just make it really tough to analyze that risk. And we've talked a lot about this as producers, about the ethical side of it, is that, especially in independent film, there's a risk inherent to what we do. Even when working with professionals, even when planning the best you can, like, we are still in an industry where we are throwing up stands and lights very quickly, and we are working on the side of mountains and shooting on the sides of roads, and you do the best you can, and you communicate well, and you hire professionals, and there's protocols in place, that there's this inherent, and you have safety meetings at the start of the day to talk through what you're doing. And everybody on set is either assuming to sign off on that risk, or has verbally signed off on that risk. And that's sort of a pact you make with your film crew. What's different about this situation and COVID is that the choices you make about that assumed risk affect people outside that set who haven't signed off on it. And so that could be a family member somebody knows, that could be somebody that you run into on the street or at the supermarket. Like, there's a whole other pool that the choices you make now affect, and it affects some people beyond the level of just getting sick. Like, there's obviously a death factor to this, which makes it all different too. So there's an ethics question that's just much larger than one we've had to tackle before.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking of the people who are on set and can be quarantined, but they're shoppers. They're people who have to go out and get stuff. They're people who go out and get craft service. It's
Yeah.
possible to really lock down 100%.
And there's talk about like having those people be doing like drops, that like all that stuff's shopped, 3 days in advance, and it's dropped at a secure location, and then it's to sit 3 days, and then somebody wipes it down, and like, those are all protocols you can think through. But there's unfortunately a question of like, at what point, like, why are we assuming that risk, like, especially on an independent level? Again, like, it's a different conversation on a commercial level, or if you're working on a studio project that like there is product that is feeding a pipeline for the financial viability of a larger company. But on an independent film level, often what's driving those films is not necessarily the need for income, it's the need to tell that story. And like, that's actually the most important thing. And so like, when you start to assess the risk element of it, we're telling stories to help people. It should never put people at risk to do so, like, ever. Like, you just even any part of making the movie. And so like, automatically that conversation leads to like, well, we should wait. Like, we should not put anybody at risk. We should wait until there's a vaccine. And so it just becomes a very challenging thing to start going through the mental process of like, well, are we not going to make an art-driven independent film for a year? Like, is there going to be just this void of never making those types of content until there's a vaccine? So it's just a big question that we're all sort of sitting on right now.
Yeah, it puts everything in a much different perspective. Collectively, we're not curing cancer. We're getting entertainment content. Colleen, I'd like to go back to you. What are you hearing from the big studios or big scripted series? Are you hearing that they're ready to roll?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just comment on some of the points that Matt shared too. And, it was interesting, it was just the ethics side of this, of do we produce this film is about a story and art piece, but coming from an economic recovery point of view, you're hiring people, getting people back to work, and then all the different ancillary businesses that support productions, whether they're large productions or small productions. I mean, each one of those jobs is important. We recognize the economic hardship of this pandemic. It's real, and that's been a very interesting position to be in. For me, the early days were all about crisis management. Focus and priority was on public health and safety, as it should be, but then it was necessary for our whole agency to do a pivot and start looking at what does recovery look like for the state of California, and reopening of the economy. What does that look like? So Governor Newsom put out his resilience roadmap and the different phases, etc. But it is all about mitigating risk. There's no question about that. And if the virus, will be here with us for a while, but also, there is the need to put paychecks in people's pockets, in people's pocket, get people back to work for so many different reasons. I mean, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on that, but this is a industry. People love the work that they do, generally speaking, and it's just an important part of their lives, and they rely on these salaries. So I just wanted to share that, because it's just such a tough thing. But at the same time, if we can get people back to work, and if we can do the best we possibly can to mitigate risk, then we can get the economy going again, and eventually kind of get it up and roaring again. Which is good for everyone. In terms of the studios, yes. Well, again, some larger productions taking place there. I think that they're still working out some of the details of and agreements between labor and management. I mean, that seems to be kind of still happening and ongoing. Some of I'm hearing, there are, things, productions continue to get delayed, but in terms how long those delays, now they're as everybody sort of ramps up and gets ready, puts together all their procedures, testing becomes more available, maybe becomes even more efficient. All of that, there's all of those kind of pieces all kind of have to work together, and eventually they will. And what's, to Matt's point too, is that, this is a creative community, and it's been pretty extraordinary hearing all these creative solutions to meet this new challenge.
Yeah, and I also really, as you were saying that about the jobs and the economic recovery, I'm like, yeah, really good point too. We have to figure out how to do both things.
Yeah.
So, Dwight, what are you looking at as far as what types of shows you're prepping now? What kind of shows are you selling?
We are definitely keeping COVID production in mind as we are developing and out pitching right now. I think there was a sort of, I think a bunch of new shows that came out, specials and things that were produced in COVID that looked like it. They looked like they were shot in Zoom and all of that. And they were very rushed on very quickly, and hats off to people for getting that done so quickly. But I feel like each iteration of one of these types of shows that's come along has elevated, and people have learned more and more. And I think now the real art to it is being able to create a show, come up with the creative for a show that can be produced in the COVID world, but doesn't feel like it has to be, and doesn't feel like that's why it was created that way. So I think that's a real interesting challenge. We've actually come up with a few new projects at our company that we're really excited about that I don't think we would have come up with otherwise, if we weren't sort of tasking ourselves with that particular challenge. So that's exciting to us. We have another show right now that is actually was on pause and is now ramping back up to go into production very shortly, with a very, very reduced footprint and with all of the COVID protocols in place. We're currently in the process of going back and forth with our guideline documents and all of that, and trying to get that all sorted out, working with the attorneys and all sorts of consultants on that. And that is its own crazy process, which I feel like, for what I do, running a business and being a producer, has now taken over about 60 to 70% of my day, is figuring out, COVID protocols. And I feel like I still have a tremendous amount to learn, but I feel like in a very short period of time, I've learned a tremendous amount about this. You kind of just have to, by just jumping in and figuring it out. And thankfully, there's a lot of other people in the business that are all figuring it out at the same time, but things are coming together very quickly, and things are starting to get figured out, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever seen a group of people so smart and so on fire figuring something out, like, it's now. Everyone I talk to is on just rolling calls all day long, getting information, sharing it, like figuring it out. It's really kind of an exciting time from that perspective.
I agree. I have to say the nimble nature and creative nature of people trying to figure out solutions has been pretty impressive.
Yeah. Now, Dwjuan, what are you looking at as far as, I know you've had different conversations about content, and like, tell us about the film that it was packaged and ready to go, and then things changed.
Well, I mean, there are a couple scenarios. The good thing is that our industry, I have always said, is about problem solving. So this is kind of like just what we do, right? We create ideas and maybe even create problems to solve them ourselves. So what was really, before COVID, I was actually in Montana shooting, and we caught it on the 14th when borders closed. And, some of our talent was from overseas. So we were kind of like, oh God, we got to get them home, before they can't even go home. And so we've been having a lot of conversation about having to get back to Montana. Luckily it was a winter movie. So God willing, by November, December, we'll be picking back up and going back out. And as Matt was saying, when we were there, I wasn't with Matt, but when we were there, we had all our people in one hotel, and our crew was in one hotel, and of course talent was in another. Now, when we come back, talent's just going to have to suck it up, and they're all going to have to be in the same hotel with us. And then we were just thinking like, well, wait, we were shooting in a winter environment, and it was really dangerous. Roads are really dangerous. We had locals who were used to driving in snow, driving our vehicles. Had a lot of people get stuck. No one got in an accident or anything. But now we're thinking like, we're quarantining everybody together, but then how are we going to actually get them to set? Because are we going to pile 15, 16 people into a pass van anymore? Or are we going to let people self-drive to set and increase the risk? So I'm actually I'm talking about everything we've all been talking about. So there are a lot of questions there. One of our biggest problems is that we have some of our largest scenes with extras to shoot going back. And so now we're like, oh my God, how are we going to do that? We've got this huge Christmas party that we have to do. Now, previously in the past, I've done things where I've shot these small groups, had them go change clothes, brought them back, and with visual effects, multiplied them in the room. That's one possible idea. Another one is that we could have we could bring in as many families as we can so that we group the families in different areas together. So it's changing the way, obviously it's changing the way we think about how we're going to do it. And then I had another project that 6 months ago, it would have been it would have been just a great family-friendly indie dramedy. After all of this, a comment came down, which was, we feel like it doesn't say anything. It's not speaking to the times anymore. And so, there's going to be a lot of that where there's going to be a pivot to more socially conscious because of the whole BLM things that are happening, and because of COVID, the environment has changed in multiple ways. There was one more thing that Dwight had mentioned about that. Oh, and just like when we had the writer's strike, how reality TV took off. And reality TV, we haven't lost reality TV. It's just another stream. I think this is going to create another stream for itself. This format. I mean, it's not new. We've seen this. People playing to one camera. We've seen Blair Witch and all those things take off. I think this is more of that, creating its own niche, which will then be funneled more into those platforms that can support it once things go back to more of a semblance to normal. I also think it's the way that AI is going to take off as well. They're already making AI actors, so the AI world is going to start to have a lot of fun, and they have their opportunity. They have the door open now for that, as well as the video game industry and the worlds that they can create now. They can do a lot of it now too. So I think it's great new frontiers everywhere.
But I'll build on sort of what the point he's touching on is that, like, I think in many ways, COVID has become an accelerant for many parts of society. I think even all the amazing movement that's happened with Black Lives Matter, like, I think that's contributed to the people being available to be a part of it. Like, and I think that's great. But I do think there's a lot of things that we need to be honest about are part of this acceleration and not necessarily COVID specific and are big changes in the industry. Like, there's great stuff talking about AI integration, or like, starting to use digital backgrounds like they had with Mandalorian and things like that. But I think, to Colleen's point, there's an economic situation happening in the industry that's also being accelerated by this. I think on one hand, it's easy to see something like the movie theaters that, they were on their way to a certain position within the industry already, and this has sort of just accelerated that probably by about 5 years. But I also think economically, to the rates that people are making and the available crew positions to people and the size of productions, I think that a lot has happened to sort of change the game about what a production is. I mean, on the commercial side, it's very easy to look at because budgets used to be, a $5 million campaign for one commercial that aired during the Super Bowl. And now with the invention of social media, you need 5 new pieces of content each week. And the brand that had that $5 million for a single campaign now has to break that up over, 50 pieces of content. And so it's still the same $5 million. You're just now making more content. So the size of those budgets are going down, and it's changing crew sizes, it's changing rates, all for the same, large brand product. And I think a similar thing's happening on narrative content because of streaming platforms, that there is an economic shift completely because of the financing that happens behind streaming. Like, it is less quantifiable than the box office results of, or the home video results of making a film, that you could say, we put X amount of dollars in, you get Y back in box office, Z back in home video. Now it's more, we decide the value structure of a film based on an algorithm that's pre-predictive ahead of time. And it's really changing like what builds what type of films. And I think that right now we're looking at, you know, are there enough jobs for people? Are crews needing to be smaller and these things in terms of COVID? But I actually think there's a larger conversation there that might be being masked by COVID a little bit. That's really just about a giant shift in the industry that was happening anyway. And this has just made it happen a lot sooner.
That is really interesting. It feels like, 6 months ago, there were not enough people in the world to do all the production that was happening. And there was a scarcity in so many areas. And now we have all those people in a scarcity of jobs. So where is it going to even out and what is it going to look like in the future? Much in the way, in 2008, it felt like a lot of it changed. Like, because a lot of things shut down, a lot of people washed out. It's going to be, I'd say 2 years from now, it's all going to look really different.
Yeah, I was just going to add to talking about projections. Projections were made for a world that actually no longer exists, at least for the moment.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we are.
Yeah, everyone is changing all their financial goals. Okay, we have some audience questions I wanted to throw out there. What do the panelists think about the viability of romantic comedies in the post-COVID-19 era?
I answer that one just because I come from soap opera background.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll keep it short. But if you go through history, through moments of conflict or economic crisis or otherwise, and now we have here pandemic crisis, people really do look for an escape. And so I would think that those romantic comedies will be something that will be very desirable. People want to see something like that for an escape. I also think that they'll also be an important space for documentaries and other kind of informational content to make sense of this extraordinary set of circumstances and kind of the impact and the outcome of all of that. But I'll be excited to watch a few romantic comedies when this is all over.
From a production standpoint, I do think there's a question asked there and a topic we haven't talked about yet, which is we can talk about the protections of crew, but there's a certain amount of interaction that the cast has to have. And not to lean too much in the romantic comedy part, but romantic comedies often involve kissing. And it is a really big topic of discussion of like, you can create these pods, you can section off your crew, you can wear masks, but ultimately at the end of the day, the actors have to interact and interact in a way that the experience of COVID can't cross their minds if the material isn't about COVID. Like they have to be able to act and completely escape from that. And so a lot of conversations about, how do you create even the intimacy of a family, like a family scene, cooking dinner together and hugging each other. Like, what does that look like in a world where people are used to keeping 6 feet apart from each other? And now you've got to put them on set and deliver that performance with strangers that they don't know what family members they're going home to or what happens in the off hours and things like that.
Dwjuan, did you want to jump in on that? I saw you unmuted.
Oh, well, I was going to make a joke. Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz will be in. Have a lot of work.
I was just going to add to that too, to Dwjuan's point is that that's exactly, so Bold and Beautiful is getting up and running. They've got a few items in the can yesterday, evidently. That's what was reported. But I had suggested to my husband, I had said, you have some actors on your show who are married or in partnership and relationships with other actors. You're pretty nimble. You write 250 episodes of TV a year. Why not make some changes and bring in a new character, and then you have a couple on set together? So we'll see. You may see that. He also has evidently a blow up doll that he's using and some tricks at camera. So anyhow, I don't want to give away all of his secrets, but that's pending.
So Tom and Rita in every movie, right?
But in seriousness with that, it should be addressed. How do we do it? And I think that's when we have to deal with the testing. I think that's when testing will have to play its part, where they get the 12-hour test prior to, and then prior to a scene where there is some intimacy, and then get a test afterwards so that they can go back and know that they didn't transmit anything to someone else. I think that, and whoever's going to be in that room, I think that's where that's all going to play its part.
Well, I think one of the questions I've had is the inevitable conversation that leads to the antibodies tests, and which people, and how there's an extra layer of protection. And again, there's still science questions behind that, but I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, well, what if we only hire crew that have the antibodies? Or, what if there's only cast who will work with other casts that have the antibodies? And I feel like there's an ethics question there that's pretty big, both about the disclosure of personal health information, but then also exclusion because of like not having the antibodies. And then I think that, obviously that can start to put in high risk of people like trying to get sick so they get the antibodies so they can go back to work and things like that. So there's definitely a tricky conversation there.
Yeah, and it opens a lot of questions around privacy and HIPAA, right? If someone tests positive on set, you got to tell other people, but not tell them who. And then do you shut down after one person, or do you wait until there's 3 people till you shut down? Have you planned to handle it if someone tests positive?
I've talked to a couple of my medics and some of the one compliance officer, not some, but some of the medics. And they, what I'm hearing is that you have the daily tests that people are going to take, or you have their questionnaire that they take in the morning. You take their temperature. You can gauge whether they contracted something on set or whether they contracted it off a set. If they contracted it off a set or on set, now you have to do the whole, like, who have you been in the vicinity of? Who have you been around? And that's where the zones are important. Because if it's somebody in production office, then we know we don't have to shut the whole production down, because that person might not have been allowed into zone A. If someone does have it, you send them home. They have to go see their own doctor. They have to get another test. And then they're supposed to stay, I've been told they're supposed to stay off a set for 10 days. And then after they've been off set for 10 days, they can test again. Then they wait a couple of days, and they have to have 2 consecutive tests that they don't have it before they can come back to work. So I think when you talk about, do you shut the whole production down? That then goes back to who have they had contact with? Have they had contact with all the zone A people, or majority of the crew? Then you might have to, at least until you can get some tests done.
Dwjuan, have you talked about the replacement of that crew member though? Like, so, obviously if it's a day player, there's certain types of positions that I think can rotate out easier, or you can work without maybe for a 2-day period. But I wonder what your protocol is for, having a backup crew member, and then also having that crew member get tested and waiting this certain amount of time before they join the set. Like, do you have like basically a dugout of crew members that are standing by to be like, we may call you during this production, so stay quarantined?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think that was for you, Dwight.
Oh, that was for me?
Yeah. Either of you guys. I mean, whoever.
Well, you know what? It's a good question, and it's a tough question, because we're discussing that right now on the show that I mentioned that we're talking about coming back on. And we definitely are going to have people on backup that we can reach out to, because it could happen quite quickly that somebody is having to drop out. And with such a small footprint, every single person is essential. We don't have people there who aren't essential, otherwise they shouldn't be there. So it becomes very challenging if one single person has to drop out. So we absolutely are coming up with a backup list, but it becomes very difficult to say to somebody, you're a backup for this job and you need to be in quarantine in order to be a backup. So that's a tough conversation to have. And I don't know that we quite cracked that yet, but we've certainly been having that discussion. It's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, because then you're hiring your bench, but are you paying them to be on the bench?
If you're forcing them to quarantine under certain rules, IA and SAG, you would probably have to pay them.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Colleen, I have a question for you. As far as the reopening, and also as we're seeing numbers increase, do you see us having to move backwards before we're able to move forward if there's another spike?
Right. Well, everybody's watching closely the benchmark statistics, and the governor works hand in glove with the state public health officials. Everybody's watching all of the numbers, and it's again, it's kind of balancing public healthy and safety, but also sort of the strong recognition of the importance of getting the economy going again, of getting people back to work. So it's a tough dance. It's a tough balance. He continues to put into effect safeguards. He was one of the first to put the stay-at-home order into effect, and now it's the requirement of wearing masks when you're out in public and if you can't socially distance. So we're all in this together collectively. We need kind of all Californians as they move about to follow the guidance that's been put out. It's for everybody's own personal safety and well-being, and we'll just it's, again, everybody's doing what they need to do in terms of production industry, and these protocols and guidelines and procedures are all being implemented and put into place. I think people, it's strong focus on keeping everybody safe. Let's just, hope that we also have more accurate testing, more rapid testing. Everything will kind of be coming together slowly but surely. And my hope is just that the cameras will continue to roll. They'll keep on rolling. More cameras rolling, and we'll just keep moving in an upward trajectory.
Yeah, I think if I've learned one thing during this time is that it's day to day, and we just have to be present in the moment and plan with the information that we have today, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
It is day to day, exactly.
One last audience question is, if you guys have been sourcing COVID compliance officers, other people would like to know where are you getting them, and also, do you know where people can train to become one?
I was told about people training to become one, that they have been getting a lot of phone calls from people, even producers, who are looking to have extra quivers in their arrow when it comes to like things that they can pivot to do. And I was told that they should go to medical school first. So yes, unfortunately. I think people can, I don't think that the compliance monitor and the compliance manager are positions that need to be medical personnel, but I do think that the compliance officer, someone, and the point that was pointed out was the difference between symptoms. It's like they were talking like there are bumps on the hands or even on the feet that were seen largely in China that medical personnel know to look for, but they're not talked about here, but they are signs to COVID. And there are certain signs because the family of disease, the COVID, is so widespread and it shares so much with like the average flu and sickness, that you do need to know where that differentiation is between, is it just
a cold or is it COVID?
I guess the recognition that, we're in a challenging state of affairs, but this is not a permanent state. We're in a state of reinvention out of necessity. This is a stubborn reality we are dealing with, but I believe we're all going to get through this. And the entertainment production industry is such a creative one, and I think there'll be some of the, strong engine in pulling everybody out of this. So I am hopeful.
I'm going to take that, Colleen, as your martini shot, which is our last shot of the day here, which I've been asking what gives you hope. And that sounded pretty hopeful. Did you want to add to that?
I don't think so. Maybe somebody else has something that they'd like to share.
Okay, how about you, Dwight?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I have been incredibly inspired by, we've already touched on this a bit, the nimbleness, the tenacity, the creativity that has risen up during this time from people to keep people employed and to keep shows going and to come up with new ideas for new shows. So that to me is incredibly exciting and encouraging. And I would say on just a purely human level, I have felt for a very long time like we as a society have become very disconnected, and we have our heads down all the time in our phones, on our devices. And I feel like we're starting to reconnect in a different way. Somebody said to me the other night on a Zoom call, you're able to look everybody in their eyes. And when you're at dinner with people, you're looking at profiles and things like that. That to me feels like a first step in that direction. But once we're back out in the world, I'm super hopeful that people are going to have their heads down less and have them up more, making eye contact and connecting with people. I think there's going to be a new appreciation for just connecting with other people once we're out in the real world.
I love that so much. Okay, Matt, top that.
I'll talk from an independent standpoint. I think there's going to be a lot of practices that are forced to be a part of working during COVID that we've actually been trying to do industry-wise that I think are just positive changes. Like, for instance, really standardizing a shorter workday. Like, we've always felt that the 12-hour workday is just like how that became industry standard is just ridiculous. And I think that that's one of the things people are talking about to keep people healthy is really working to have those shorter days, no matter what size production. And then I think even, to go back to those more economic productions, I think there's an opportunity to create a real bridge between lower budget films and the unions, that a lot of the lower budget projects I think would really love to work with the unions, and a lot of producers are not anti-union. They would love to be able to give their crew pension and health and things like that. I think the one that gets in the way the most is the minimum staffing requirements, and able to keep your sets more nimble and small. And I think that as we sort of continue to explore success through COVID, I think that it might cause the unions to open their minds about the amount of staff that needs to be on set as a minimal requirement, especially as technology and everything else has changed. And it might allow some of these smaller productions to be union without it being so much of a hindrance to the economics of it. So I think that there's going to be some things that happen that can be more sustainable long-term that have a really positive effect on everyone.
Wonderful. Dwjuan, you get the final word.
There is a really great medical compliance company you can call. And they're called On-Call Medic. And so you can give them a call. They are a turnkey company that can supply anything that you need. And so from equipment all the way down to personnel. I think that this has taught us that we really do care about each other, and it's going to show us how much, when things are bad, humans kind of really pull together and support each other. And so that is the beauty that is coming out of all of this. So.
And that is where we are going to end it for today. I want to thank all of our panelists, Dwight Smith, Matt Miller, Dwjuan Fox, Colleen Bell. Thank you to Greenslate for being the presenting sponsor of this series. You can find us at gslate.com, and also Catch a Break Podcast for producing it. You can see the replay of this on Facebook or on YouTube, and you can find us at catchabreakpodcast.com, and you can subscribe there or on all the podcast places for the podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.